Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you, and if you're returning, thanks for coming back. I'm really excited to see you again. On this channel, on Tuesdays, we talk about a true crime case that I've been thinking about or that I just recently stumbled across that I thought would be interesting. Yeah, so if that's something you're interested in, you can go ahead and hit the little subscribe button down below and the little bell icon, and so you can be notified when I upload. Only if you're interested though, no pressure. I do want to give a quick warning that some of the things that we talk about on here can be kind of heavy, so and by kind of I mean really heavy, so that if that's something your mental health cannot handle, just do me a favor and click off this video and I can catch you somewhere else. But your mental health is always going to be so much more important than any YouTube video ever will be. With all of that being said, let's go ahead and jump into today's video. Today we're going to be talking about Jeanette DePalma. This is a wild case that is still unsolved to this day, and it includes things like human sacrifice and occult practices. It's just a really spooky case, so there's the extra warning if that's something you don't want to listen to. It's probably the best to just get off this video right now. But Jeanette was born on August 3rd of 1956 in Jersey City, New Jersey. Her parents were Florence and Salvador DePalma, and she was one of 8 children. She was known as being kind and beautiful, as you can see. She was also very religious. She planned on attending a Bible college after she graduated high school. While it's most talked about that she was a very religious girl, it's also well known by her friends that she did enjoy being a little bit rebellious on the down low, I guess you could say. Her friends often described her as a little bit wild too, but I also think it's important to note that most teenagers are. I remember when I was 18, I liked to party a little bit myself, even though I grew up very religious and I went to church every Sunday, every Wednesday, lead singer of a praise and worship band. Like, I was involved in the church, and I went out and did some crazy things. I think that's a pretty typical thing for teenagers to do, is to go out and experiment life. All of that to say that I don't think there's anything wrong with going out and exploring a little bit, and that's what Jeanette was doing. She was just exploring life a little bit more. Jeanette was just 16 years old, and she was living in Springfield Township, New Jersey with her parents. On August 7th of 1972, Jeanette told her mother that she was going to go see a friend and she was going to take the train to go to her friend's house. But Jeanette never made it to her friend's home, and she also never made it home that night. Jeanette was not the kind of girl that wouldn't call her parents if plans had changed or she, was going to go do something else. She was always really good at communicating what she was doing with her parents. So when she didn't come back home and her parents didn't receive a call, they immediately knew that something was wrong, and so they called police as soon as they realized that she was missing. The search for Jeanette would go on for 6 weeks, but there was basically no clues or no leads whatsoever. No one had seen her, no one had heard from her, there was no sightings of her anywhere while everyone was searching and missing posters, everything. It was very well known that Jeanette was missing, and there was absolutely no leads as to where she might have gone. But on September 19th of 1972, that would change in a very dramatic way. There was a dog owner that was walking their park in Hodile Park in Springfield Township, but they were walking in a wooded area of that park. And you know how dogs will kind of, if they're not on a leash, they'll kind of wander away and then come back to the owner. That's what this dog was doing. And one time when this dog wandered away and came back, it brought back something in its mouth. And when the owner kind of looked a little bit closer, they realized that it was a human arm. The owner immediately called police, and they said that in the back of their mind, because they knew that Jeanette was missing, and so when they saw this human arm, they knew that this could very easily be Jeanette. Police showed up immediately and started searching for Jeanette because everyone just figured that this was probably the lead that they were looking for to find her. Jeanette was found lying on top of a cliff. This is where things get kind of weird. There are many reports of what was or how her body was found, like the positioning of her body. Certain reports say that it looked like there was rocks all around her, like had specifically been placed around her to kind of resemble a coffin shape. This coffin shape was used by like fallen branches and rocks, and it was put around her body. Then there were also makeshift crosses inside of that. Now, this is where things get really dicey because there are some reports that she was found lying on top of a pentagram, and that she was surrounded by animal remains. Now, it's strange because publicly police have denied these claims, but there's two police officers in particular. One said that there was nothing of the sort found, like there was nothing strange found around her body, while another police officer said that this was all true, that all of these strange things that people claimed to have found around her body were true. But some locals also said that this cliff that she was found on was also called Devil's Teeth. So it's not a hard reach to go from murder to human sacrifice if you're putting all of these things into how her body was found. Jeanette's body was very severely decomposed by the time she was found. She had been out there for 6 weeks at that point, and so there was many different types of weather that had come through, and she was just exposed to the elements. There was not much of an autopsy done because it was basically skeletal remains that they had found, but they were able to x-ray the body, and so they were able to rule out a gunshot wound and a stab wound. There was also no drugs found on Jeanette's person or around the vicinity, but the medical examiner did also find unusually large amounts of lead in her body. But somehow the medical examiner was able to come up with a cause of death of strangulation. This is what everyone thought that she had died of. One thing that was never really answered, and there was another YouTuber that covered this case that brought this up, like I didn't even think of it, she did, I'll tag her down below, but she said that she brought up the question of like, how did the dog get this arm? Was it like, did the dog rip her arm off, or was it already, like, what kind of a cut was, like, what happened to the arm and how was the dog able to bring the arm down to the owner? That's something that was never answered, so that leaves a lot of open questions. There are really no clues as to how Jeanette was murdered. After several weeks of not finding anything, the FBI did take the clothes that Jeanette was found in and some samples of the dirt that was around her body to be tested, but they were unable to find any foreign DNA or anything like that. There were also some stains in her underwear and in her bra, but the FBI said that they were unable to test that because they were so decomposed that they could not find any DNA in it. The media was completely on top of this case, though, and they did not hesitate to say that this was a case of human sacrifice. And once the media took off with this, so did the rest of the rumors. The rumor started that Jeanette's murder had actually happened as a human sacrifice performed by a local coven of witches. With all of the speculation of what was found around Jeanette's body and how her body was found, it's not a huge reach to understand why people started going with this, but there was absolutely no physical evidence to support any of these claims. It wasn't long after Jeanette's body was found that her pastor, Reverend Tate, came out and started talking about Jeanette and her sister having a drug problem. There is also no evidence that Jeanette had a drug problem of any kind. She did smoke some marijuana on occasion, but it wasn't like she had this massive, like she was this massive drug addict. Like it seemed like she was just a teenage girl that was experimenting with different, types of things like marijuana. Like it's not that big of a deal. I think we all understand that now. It was much different back in the 70s. Marijuana was still looked at like this horrible, awful thing. And I think we understand now that it's not really like that. But she did smoke marijuana on occasion, but she wasn't a drug addict. What's funny though is that Jeanette was very close to to the pastor, Reverend Tate, and she did seem to have a pretty close relationship with him as far as like him helping her with daily struggles and those kinds of things. But Jeanette was also dating Reverend Tate's son, and they had actually just broken up a week before Jeanette was murdered. Which is kind of strange, but there's no evidence to support that Reverend Tate or his son had anything to do with it either. But not long after Jeanette's body was found, there was another tip that came in about a homeless man that lived in the park where Jeanette was found. The homeless man's name was Red, and just shortly after Jeanette went missing, Red apparently skipped town pretty quickly. Red was eventually tracked down and police were able to interview him and interrogate him, and it was found that he had absolutely nothing to do with Jeanette's murder. Donald Schwartz was the police officer that initially found Jeanette. He was the one that came across her body for the he was the first one at the scene. He went on record saying that there was absolutely no satanic anything around her body, that all of the speculation around the pentagram and the crosses and all of that, it was all false. Donald thinks that these claims were started because of another police officer that was at the scene that made comments about this possibly being a sacrificial or like a ritual of some kind, like a satanic ritual. Donald seems to think that Jeanette was up there with her friends and that she was doing drugs and she overdosed, even though there's absolutely no proof that Jeanette was doing any type of drugs other than smoking the occasional joint. So an overdose is really unlikely. Donald also goes on to say that Jeanette was wearing flip-flops when she was found, and he said that the hike up to the cliff, the Devil's Teeth, where they were at, was a very difficult hike, and that he was wearing boots and had a hard time getting up there. So her wearing flip-flops just kind of proved to him that she would have had to have help to get up there, because no one could do that in flip-flops, which maybe. The thing is, Jeanette was known to hang out with a group of kids who were doing a little bit of harder drug, but again, don't you think that somebody would have slipped up if there had been an overdose and there was a group of friends? Like, somebody would have slipped by now and told the truth of what had happened to Jeanette. Jeanette's case went cold pretty quickly, and it wasn't until the late 90s and the early 2000s that a editor in New Jersey, he was the editor for the Weird NJ magazine, his name is Mark Moran, he started receiving anonymous letters about Jeanette's case. Mark then started investigating her case a little bit deeper. But when they started looking into it, Mark claims that the Springfield police said that Jeanette's case file was actually destroyed. So Mark started looking a little bit deeper, and he came to the conclusion that this was actually a massive cover-up by the Springfield Police Department. This is his opinion. He alleges that there is a cover-up of some kind for some reason, and that's why Jeanette's murder has never been solved. But Mark believes that his investigation led him to believe that Jeanette's murder had connections to other murders in the area, even though there's no real evidence proving this, and that this was all covered up by the police. He was also the one that sued the police department to have DNA tested in Jeanette's case, and he was sent a case file that showed that the FBI had tried to get DNA from her clothes, but that they were unable to because the samples were too decomposed, which maybe in the early 2000s this might have been the case, but I think if they took a look at it now, it might be possible, because we just saw the boy in the box, his identity get revealed because of DNA testing. They were able to reconstruct his DNA with really, it was really old DNA, and they were able to do it. So I think if they took a second look at Jeanette's case now, they might be able to find something. But where it's strange when it comes to Jeanette's case file, the Springfield Police Department, there's some people in the department that say that the case file was actually destroyed by Hurricane Floyd back in 1999. But then there's also some people on the force who say that the case files are still there and that they still have Jeanette's case file. So who really knows what's true? But Jeanette's nephew has come out and said that he does not believe that this was a human sacrifice murder. He thinks that Jeanette was simply murdered and that somebody knows exactly what happened to her. He also doesn't believe that Jeanette died of an overdose, because it was well known by her family that Jeanette did not have a drug problem. Like I said, she would smoke the occasional joint, but she didn't have like this severe drug problem that many people kind of seem to make others want to believe. Her nephew, his name is Ray, he thinks that she was just murdered, and somebody is still out there who knows exactly what happened to Jeanette, and I agree with him completely. But in recent news, in the spring of 2021, a couple years ago, the serial killer Richard Cottingham made several statements to a journalist, Jesse P. Pollock, and he is a writer for Weird NJ magazine. He made several statements to Jesse saying that he had actually killed Jeanette while she was hitchhiking. But since then, nothing has been said about it at all. Like, no more talk of Jeanette at all. And so, I don't know, I just feel like this case is very solvable, especially with DNA technology being what it is today. But Jeanette's murder happened during the time of like satanic panic when everyone was freaked out about all these Satanists and stuff like that, which just turned out to be a complete sham. But satanic panic was a wild time, and it seemed like everyone was really, really quick to jump on the bandwagon saying that people had been murdered by human sacrifice and those kinds of things. But I feel like it really overshadows what actually happened to Jeanette, and it overshadows her real life. And I really feel like her murder could be solved if people took it seriously. Just being honest, if they took it seriously and started looking at the real facts surrounding the case. This case probably could have been solved as soon as it happened, but what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that they could solve Jeanette's case using DNA technology that we have today? And do you think that it was a ritualistic killing? Because I definitely don't. I don't believe that. I think what happened to Jeanette was tragic, and the person who did it should be forced to come to justice. But like I said, leave your thoughts down in the comments below. It's pretty much all I have for you today. And so yeah, I look forward to hearing from you. And I hope this finds you safe and well and loved. And I will see you next week. Bye.